NATO's Rutte and Ukrainian President Zelensky pay a surprise visit to a military hospital in Odessa.
A Moscow court has sentenced 4 journalists to prison over alleged ties to former opposition leader Alexei Navalny. A top US commander has warned of a growing threat in the Pacific due to military ties between China, North Korea and Russia.
NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky have paid a surprise visit to a military hospital in Odessa. They met with wounded Ukrainian soldiers and medical personnel, acknowledging their service and sacrifice. Rutte praised Ukraine's democratic values and Zelensky's human-centered efforts.
You are spending your time, your days, your weeks, your years on this, and we have seen it. It's so important, and this is the difference between Ukraine and Russia. This is the difference between a dictatorship and a democracy.
During a meeting with Rutte, Zelensky confirmed ongoing talks in Turkey on security in the Black Sea as part of the coalition of the willing. These talks are military-focused and not peace negotiations with Russia, which continues to reject the US proposed unconditional ceasefire.
Medical teams in Sumy, Ukraine are still dealing with the aftermath of Russia's deadliest attack in the region this year. Back-to-back missiles hit the city center on Sunday, killing 35 people and wounding over 100. One doctor spoke of his shock at the killing in the 21st century.
Така трагедія, яка я не можу зрозуміти оцих людей, ті людей, які посилають сюди ці ракети. Я зовсім не розумію їх. Що це в 21 столітті є такі люди, яким подобається вбивати других людей. Я в шокі просто.
Marina Ilashenko and her 13-year-old son Kirilo, injured in Russian attack, were caught in the second blast while on a bus.
Ми зрозуміли, що йде запах гарі, а двері заблоковані. Тобто ми не можемо вийти. Почали кричати водію, що відкрий двері, але водій вже нас не чув, тому що він загинув на місці відразу. І у нас іншого виходу не було, як починати відкривати двері. Ми спочатку спробували з цієї сторони, у нас не вийшло. А тоді, поки я думала, що робити далі, дивлюсь, моя дитина вже плиганула в вікно цих дверей і з тієї сторони відчиняє двері. І у нього вийшло відчинити з тієї сторони. Він відчинив, переді мною були люди, лежали. Він допоміг їм спочатку піднятися, а потім випустив мене. І він дуже злякався, тому що я вся була, обличчя все було.
Residents report more attacks on Sumy recently, Sundays being the worst. It follows a deadly strike in Kryvyi just over a week ago. These attacks raise fears across Ukraine and cast a shadow over ceasefire talks.
Talks between the US and Russia on a ceasefire in Ukraine have continued over the last 2 months at a time when Russian attacks on Ukrainian cities have intensified. The US says it is pushing for an immediate solution. However, Washington's initiative is starting to look hollow. Some analysts at the Delphi Economic Forum in Greece believe.
It's not filled with principles, as in upholding the principle of sovereignty, upholding the principle of people to be able to decide their own government. It is upholding the principle of trying to end wars, and that is not a bad one in itself, because bloodshed does breed bitterness and makes it harder to solve. But all in all, it has been confusing and without clear principles.
Given the American consensus on strategic preeminence in the Indo-Pacific and the relationship with China, analysts say Ukraine's fate cannot leave whoever is in power in Washington indifferent. This is because if Russia wins, the strategic challenge posed by China becomes even greater.
For sure, he needs a success also in geopolitics. After Afghanistan, after Kabul, after some other shortages, I would say, America cannot just lose Ukraine, cannot just sell Ukraine to Russia. And also, I think Americans are more and more aware that the alliance between Russia and China is strong. that Russia won't change side. It's a science fiction scenario.
Although the battlefield reality for Ukraine remains difficult, Russia has had very little to show compared to the price it has paid.
Το Κίεβο υποστηρίζει ότι μόνο ο Πούτιν επωφελείται από τη συνέχιση του πολέμου, τονίζοντας παράλληλα ότι η σύγκρουση έχει πλέον παγκόσμια διάσταση, δηλαδή δεν αφορά μόνο την Ουκρανία, αλλά την Ευρώπη, τις Ηνωμένες Πολιτείες και την ίδια τη διεθνή τάξη. Από τους Δελφούς για το Euronews, Φέη Δουλγέρη.
Four journalists have been sentenced to 5.5 years in prison each by a Moscow court for alleged involvement in activities linked to late Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny. They have been accused of being part of Navalny's foundation, designated as extremist in 2021. Lawyers representing the journalists have denounced the verdict as illegal and unfair.
Мы однозначно будем все подавать жалобы, тут вообще никаких разговоров нет, потому что сама по себе профессия журналиста это не является экстремизмом, а уж исходя из тех материалов дела, которые есть, я скажу так, что доказательств того, что ребята совершили какие-то, не то что преступления, а вообще проступки, на наш взгляд, не представлено.
The trial was held behind closed doors, justified by authorities citing provocation risks from Navalny supporters. Their pre-trial detention was repeatedly extended, keeping all four journalists under arrest until June 2025. The closed trial is part of a wider crackdown on dissent that has grown after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022.
Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei says he's not overly optimistic or pessimistic about the outcome of talks with the US, which will begin their second round on Saturday.
نه خیلی خوشبینیم نه خیلی بدبینیم. به طرف مقابل البته خیلی بدبینیم، طرف مقابل رو قبول نداریم، میشناسیم طرف مقابل. اما به توانایی خودمون خوشبین هستیم.
Khamenei went on to say the red lines are clear for both sides and urged officials not to tie the country's affairs to the talks. Meanwhile, US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff has told US media the upcoming talks will be on verification of uranium enrichment and weaponry.
This is going to be much about verification on the enrichment program and then ultimately verification on weaponization. That includes missiles, the type of missiles that they have stockpiled there, and it includes the trigger for a bomb.
Witkoff went on to echo President Trump's sentiments that if the talks are not positive, the US will have to, quote, seek alternatives. The top US military leader in the Pacific, Admiral Samuel Paparo, has issued a warning to senators about the growing security risks in the Indo-Pacific region posed by the deepening military cooperation between China, North Korea and Russia.
North Korea's development of advanced nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles pose a direct threat to our homeland and our allies, and are executing a deepening cooperation with Russia. Russia's growing military cooperation with China adds another layer of complexity, creating a compounded challenge with the deepening cooperation among China, Russia, and North Korea.
Paparo went on to explain that China is supplying most of Russia's machine tools and legacy semiconductors to support its defense industry, likely in exchange for sensitive military technology that could improve China's submarine fleet. It follows claims by the South Korean military that North Korea has also deployed thousands of troops to support Russian forces in the war against Ukraine, while Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has previously accused Russia of actively recruiting Chinese citizens to fight alongside its forces. Former Peruvian President Ollanta Humala and his wife Nadine Heredia have been sentenced to 15 years in prison for using laundered funds from a Brazilian construction company to finance Humala's political campaigns.
Al señor Ollanta o Moisés Humalatazo la pena de 15 años de pena privativa de libertad efectiva, la misma que debe ser ejecutada de manera provisional de conformidad al artículo 402.2 del Código Procesal Penal.
The pair were found to have received millions of dollars of illegal contributions from construction company Odebrecht and from the government of former Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez. The ruling makes Humala the third former Peruvian president imprisoned for corruption in the last 2 decades. Their trial began in 2022 and the couple were convicted alongside 8 others.
The US government has frozen over $2 billion in funding for Harvard University. It follows Harvard's refusal to meet Trump administration demands to curb campus activism. This is the 7th time the government has withheld funds from a major university, most of them being Ivy League schools, pressuring them to comply with its political agenda. Demands include governance reforms, changes to admission policies, auditing views of diversity on campus, and not recognizing certain student groups. To support its view, the administration has cited concerns over anti-Semitism during last year's pro-Palestine protests on university campuses. But Harvard President Alan Garber has rejected its demands and said the university will not surrender its independence or relinquish its constitutional rights. The government announced the funding freeze shortly afterwards. Meanwhile, Washington has launched investigations and detained and deported a number of foreign students in relation to pro-Palestinian protests.